Hello, hello. Woohoo! All right. How is everybody doing? Awesome. All right, my name is Edward Bailey. I get the privilege of leading this incredible group that many of you have heard of called No Longer Bound. It is, for those of you that don't know, a 12-month, which is long-term residential treatment center for adult males. So a little bit about my story and how I came about working in this line of work that I work in. I know some of you have heard that as well. I got a chance to speak here in the main service. But for those of you that haven't, I went through No Longer Bound 13 and a half years ago. I was a 24-year-old kid who was destined to not see 25. I was a hopeless, strung-out meth addict. I tell people that I think I had about a year left to live because the last guy that I got high with died a year later. And I'm fully convinced that I would have been with him, and that would have been the end of my story. And my mother would have buried her son, which really should never happen to any mother anywhere. So what I do mostly now here at No Longer Bound is fundraising. I get to do some really cool things like oversight and vision casting, but I spend a lot of time fundraising. The reason I tell you that is because what I do not do is I am not a therapist. I'm not a licensed counselor. I'm not our clinical director. And so I don't get to spend much time in those group ministry or therapeutic environments. But I do hope that I still have something that is helpful for you from the experiences that I've been through and my exposure to the whole world of recovery and the battle of addiction they're going through. And hopefully I have something that is useful to you for yourself, for you personally, for your family, or really especially for those mentees or those people that you are serving, which is just amazing. So I just do want to say thank you. I want to kind of echo what Jenny said, to say thank you so much for being here. I think it just says so much that you took time out of your night to be here. But more importantly, maybe just for 2 seconds, just pause and reflect on what it means for you to be here and why you're here. The fact that what did God have to do in your heart to get you to a point to where you wanted to invest your time and invest your life to be a mentor and to care for people on that level. And that's just so special. So thanks for doing that and for caring for people on that level. And also thank you for, like Jenny said, for filling out that survey. That was really helpful for me to get an understanding a little bit about who you are and what you've been through as it relates to what we're talking about tonight. And what it told me is that 59% of you have actually dealt with addiction firsthand, be it either yourself, a friend, or a family member. So that is the majority of this room, which is extremely common in most any room anywhere these days. Addiction is just an epidemic, literally an actual epidemic. It is a massive problem. And so in most rooms where there's people gathered, that's the case. So the majority of us have been affected by addiction firsthand. It also told me that 39% of you have lost someone to addiction, know someone that has lost that battle and that fight, be it a friend or a family member. So I'm so sorry that such a large percentage of us have experienced that kind of loss. Again, I think that's something that never has to happen. But what it really tells us is that we are all in this together, that addiction has affected all of us. And I believe that if the problem affects all of us, then the solution's got to be an all of us thing too. If the problem affects all of us, the solution's going to take all of us too. So I want to talk a little bit about addiction tonight. I just want to also do my best Clay impersonation to write on this really cool board here. I don't even know if I have anything of value to write, but I just had to write on it. So there's so much information about addiction out there. I want to talk a little bit about some of it, and then hopefully give you some things to do, some practical things that might help you with someone that you're mentoring that's dealing with addiction, and then we'll get a chance to do a little bit of Q&A as well. But addiction, there is so much out there about it. You may be a licensed therapist. I know some of you are counselors. I heard that in the survey as well. And so maybe you spent your whole life learning about it. Maybe you're more like me and you're a PhD level Google researcher, And so we know everything about anything because we read the first two things that popped up on Google. But literally, there is thousands of pages of information. And not only that, then the information starts to combat each other and conflict. And so we think addiction is this, and we think addiction is this, and you should treat it this way. And if you're treating it that way, then you're wrong. And oh my God, what do we do with all of that? And at the end of the day, addiction is a really complex problem with pretty complex solutions. And so I don't want to dumb any of that down. I think it's all great. I think the science of it is super important. I think what's happening in the brain chemistry is super important. I don't want to take away from any of that. Learn everything that you can. What I do want to do, though, is to give us something that is simple, that we can synthesize tonight, something that's practical, and that will help you with the people that you're mentoring. So I'm going to try to do that. So what I want to do is to give you our definition of what addiction is. When I say our, I'm talking about no longer bound. And what that means is the approach in which we deal with addiction or the people that are affected by it. So here's what our definition of addiction is at No Longer Bound. Addiction is an escalating, needs-driven relationship. An escalating, needs-driven relationship. So it is something that is growing, that is escalating, and we deal with addiction in the context of a relationship. So if you ask me what is addiction, I would say addiction is a relationship, that they have an addictive relationship to what it is that they are addicted to. So what is it? What we deal with primarily is drugs and alcohol. You're also going to deal with pornography. You're going to deal with gambling, or maybe some of the more socially acceptable or even positive-looking addictions, which are like work and exercise. We would say that someone has an addictive relationship to that thing, that it was an escalating relationship, that it was needs-based, and it got to that point. So we don't know that exact moment when an addiction became an addiction. At which point? Was it the very first time they did it? Was it later on when it was escalating? I'm not sure. But what we do know is that it is growing, that it is escalating. And somewhere along that journey, there was a rewiring that happened in our brain, and you became dependent on that thing. You had to have that thing. As a matter of fact, it almost wasn't a separate thing. It was a part of you. Let me give you maybe a practical real-life example. This is my friend, Mr. Cell Phone. I am highly addicted to this thing. My name is Edward, and I have a problem, right? We're all in a recovery meeting. All right, so I am so dependent on this phone. It is actually so many things that I used to need, and now it's all together. It's like my calculator, and it's my roadmap, and it's my camera, and it's all in this one device. But it was an escalating relationship when I became dependent on it. As a matter of fact, I used to not have a mobile phone at all because we didn't have mobile phones. And so I wasn't dependent on it then, and then it kind of went to a pager, and I'd be like, oh, I got a page. I'll stop by a payphone maybe and call you, or maybe I won't. And then it really started to grow when I got my first BlackBerry. Does anybody have a BlackBerry? Anybody still have a BlackBerry? Don't raise your hand. Don't ever admit to that. But remember, it had that little light on the outside, and it would light and let you know that, like, oh my God, there's a notification. And it was like, somebody needs me. Somebody thinks I'm important, and they have to know what's going on with me. And eventually now, my relationship has grown so much with this cell phone that I don't have to think about checking it. I don't have to think about seeing what's going on. It is almost a part of my body to where I walk around my house, and it's never not within arm's reach. You talk about dependent. If it wasn't in my pocket right now, I would feel weird. It would feel, so that is a picture of an escalating, it grew to that point. It is an escalating relationship that I have with this thing that I'm addicted to. So what is it, if it is an escalating relationship, what is it that is driving that escalation? Why is it a growing or an escalating relationship? Well, I believe that they are in pursuit, the person that's addicted to something, that they are looking for something that they need. All right? So that's why we say that it is an escalating, needs-driven relationship. All right, there are some things that all of us in this room share, whether you're addicted to anything or not, and those are that we have needs. I got to get my needs met. You got to get your needs met. And some of those physical needs are water, food, oxygen. I have to have those things. Those are needs that I have. If I don't get them, I'll die, or at least I'm going to die trying to get them. So some of the other needs that are just as important and just as vital to my life are some of those soul level needs, those deeper things. We would call those our laws. These are our needs. Love? Acceptance? If I misspell one of these, just tell me later. Wait till I'm off the stage. Worth? Anybody want to take a shot at the last one? Security. There you go. She gets an extra brownie. These are things that we have to need, that we have to have, that we need. If we do not have them, we will die trying to get them. We have to have these things, okay? So why do we deal with addiction at No Longer Bound in the context of relationship? The reason is because we believe that someone in their addiction is looking to have their needs met. And we believe that our needs, our laws, love, acceptance, worth, and security are met in the context of relationships. So I believe that I was created to need these things. There's no getting away from it. I have to have them. I was created and made with this. And I believe that the way that I was created to get those needs met is through a relationship. Okay? So healthy relationships are how I get these needs met. Unhealthy relationships are where someone in their addiction gets the counterfeit of these things. The counterfeit of these things, right? So here's something that you don't hear very often about addiction. You hear about it somewhere in here when it gets really bad, and it's like, oh, it's so bad, and it's hurting you, and all these things. What you don't hear that often is, it feels good. Man, it feels good. If someone that's in their addiction doesn't tell you that, then you're just not hearing the whole story. It feels amazing at some point. Has anybody in this room done cocaine? Raise your hand. I'm just kidding. Thank you, man, for being honest. Don't look. She didn't raise her hand. I'm kidding. Doing cocaine feels so much like love. It is such a close counterfeit. Like such a close counterfeit. It feels so close to that. Right? And so when you ever heard someone in addiction say, I was chasing that first high? Or slang is, I was chasing the dragon, I was chasing that thing. What they were doing was, at some point, they found something really close to what felt like getting their needs met. It felt so much like I was loved. And it felt like I was worth something, like I was so confident to go and to talk to people. It felt like I believed that I was worth something. And these people I was around, they accepted me for like who I was. The train wreck that I was, they accepted me for that. And the fact that it was always there when I needed it made me feel really safe. Right? And these are really close counterfeits to something that you were created to do. So when we think about people in their addiction, they act crazy. I mean, they are like crazy, right? Well, if I took away your food and your water and your oxygen, guess what you would do? You'd get crazy. You would kill people. You would knock them out of the way. You would do what you had to do because you were dying. And so the reason they're so crazy is because they are chasing the thing that they were created to do. They were created to get those needs met. And so why are they so crazy? Because they're completely void of what they need, and they're pretty convinced that if they go harder, that they're going to find those things, right? And so why do I tell you that? Because it helps us to understand something and someone that is dealing with something that looks so stupid. And you're like, well, just quit and just don't do anymore. And we start to kind of understand them a little bit better. And so what we don't get taught, we don't hear is that it worked for a while, and that's what they're trying to do, just like the expiration date of milk, right? Milk is amazing, and it works really great, but at a certain point when it expires, it goes really sour, really bad, really fast, right? So what then if the escalation of this addictive relationship is us getting the counterfeit of our needs, then what is on the other end of this spectrum? Another way to ask that is, what is the opposite of addiction? Well, intuitively, we would all probably think this: sobriety. The opposite of addiction is sobriety. The goal of sobriety: stay sober 1 day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 year at a time, right? I mean, we think about sobriety being the answer. Now, I think that sobriety is really important, and it is a big goal at No Longer Bound, but I think it happens somewhere in here. Okay, we want to de-escalate an addictive relationship, a dependent addictive relationship, to a point to where someone is sober. But what we do not want to do is to focus so much on sobriety because it's just too shallow of a goal. Does anybody know anyone that is sober and miserable? Don't point at your neighbor. I mean, these people could probably use a few margaritas just to not be so miserable. Just kidding, not kidding, right? So sobriety is a really important step, but it's just a step. So we want to get them sober, and or you could just call it free, okay? So they are no longer physically dependent on the thing that they were addicted to. And they're finally at that point then to where they can make a logical, a sound mind decision on how they want to pursue getting their needs met. Do they want to go the more familiar route? We might call that relapse. It might feel a lot safer because they've been down this road so many times and it feels predictable and they can control that, right? It may be the worst relationship in the world, but I know this thing. This feels safe. Or do they want to then go down the really dangerous path of getting your true needs met? And so the opposite of addiction, what we would say is intimacy. Intimacy is the opposite of addiction. Intimacy is the opposite of addiction. So that is our big win at No Longer Bound, that we would provide lasting intimacy with God, self, and others. Lasting intimacy with God, self, and others. And so if here you were getting an addictive relationship, if you were getting the counterfeit of your needs met, we believe that a journey towards intimacy is how you're going to get your needs, your true needs met in a relationship. All right, who's that relationship with? We can come back to this, but that relationship is with God, self, and others. Has anybody seen this TED Talk with, I may butcher this guy's name, but it's Johann Hari. It's titled something along the lines of, everything that you think you knew about addiction is wrong. Has anybody seen this video? Yeah, if you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's really good. This is what this guy looks like. And if you have seen it, watch it again. So what he's talking about is some really cool concepts. And the reason it's titled, Everything You Thought You Knew About Addiction is Wrong, is because some of the things that we have heard about addiction, I think maybe actually are wrong. The premise of what his TED Talk is about is really something that we would agree with. It's really kind of the DNA of No Longer Bound and what our approach to addiction is. And he's wrapping his around a scientific study that he calls Rat Park, and it's about these rats and using cocaine, et cetera. But what he is talking about in general, his overarching premise of that conversation is that the more someone moves towards intimacy, I think he might call it connectedness, or he's talking about your environment and being connected. In other words, the more that we move towards getting our needs met in the context of relationships, the way that we are created to, the less we need the thing that we are addicted to, right? The more that I am getting my needs met through healthy relationships with God, self, and others, the less that I need this. And so what does that mean for you? Or what's the point in me telling you that? Well, you may not be like me. You might not be a licensed therapist. And you're sitting there going, someone's acting crazy in their addiction. And you're like, I think I remember reading that one thing about the endorphins and the stuff and dopamine that's happening in their head. And so how should I, whatever. And we're just like, how do I even help this person? And you're completely not even on the same playing field as them in understanding why they're acting so insane. But what you do know is you have needs. You understand a person that is in pursuit of getting their needs met, and you know how to help someone move towards intimate relationships. You know how to have a relationship with God. You know how to have a relationship with yourself and with other people. And as a matter of fact, the fact that you're mentoring someone in your life, you're probably going to get to be one of these others because they're going to get to have a healthy relationship with you. And so you get an opportunity to help them get their needs met and vice versa. They're also helping you meet yours because you're in a two-way street relationship, a healthy relationship. So people ask me, 13 years later, do you still crave drugs? I'm like, no. It just doesn't seem to make any sense anymore. It almost feels like I'm telling somebody else's story. Like, why would I, is anybody else thinking about going and doing heroin tonight? Again, same lady raising her hand. I'm just kidding. No, I think I'd rather go home and, hang out with my wife. I'm going to get up in the morning. I'm going to do my quiet time. It's like one of my favorite times of the day. And, it just makes no sense. In other words, my journey towards intimacy, I get my needs met. And so there's no big void in my life. And I'm so aware now of what the counterfeit of that was. And the counterfeit just doesn't stack up anywhere close to having your authentic needs met, right? So moving towards intimacy is moving away from addiction. And so that is something that you can do, that you can walk with someone and journey with them as you move them towards intimacy, one step at a time. So what is God's role in all this? Well, sometimes God and faith or spirituality can get kind of tricky around recovery. And And I completely understand why, because Christians, we can just be so dang crazy sometimes, can't we? I mean, we can just mess up anything, right? And we can be so spiritually minded that we're of no earthly good. In other words, we're like, well, God's the answer. You just need to lay it at the cross, right? And we're like, yeah, but the scientists have found out there's some really important stuff. And so I think that the science of it is really important, right? And so let's don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. All right, let's have a balanced approach to this. And so God, I believe, is one of these relationships where we get those needs met. So here's what we would say about God and kind of how to frame it all. To me, I would say that he is everything, because I do believe that he created me. I do believe that he was the creator of my needs, and I do believe that he created a relationship to get to those needs. And so another way of saying that is that we would say that God is a relational God. God is a relational God, that he created us, and he has a desire to be in a relationship with us. So God is a relational God, okay? We believe that God is a relational God, and so healing happens in the context of relationships. God is a relational God. We get our needs met through relationships, and healing happens in the context of relationships. So to me, it's everything, right? And don't get concerned about the word healing when it comes to recovery too, because again, we can kind of make that a one-time thing. Healing to me is a process. I mean, sometimes there is a moment that you can point to. I had a knee surgery, and I know the actual date that I got that operated on, so there was a moment there. But I have to now maintain that healing, and I have to take care of it, and I have to not work too hard on it, because then there'll be some consequences, and maybe it'll swell up, or maybe it will relapse, right? So healing, I believe, happens in the context of relationships, so really, really important. So let me just kind of summarize it again here, just to give us something really clear, that we believe that addiction is a relationship. Addiction is a relationship, and that intimacy is on the other end, or the opposite of addiction. Addiction is a relationship. We get our needs met through relationship, and the more that we help someone, or that we personally journey towards intimacy, a true, authentic intimacy, the less we will need a counterfeit option to get our needs met. So that's kind of our approach to No Longer Bound, boiled down really simply. And so I want to give you some practical, some hopefully helpful things for whether you're mentoring someone currently that is in their addiction, someone that might be thinking about getting into recovery, someone that might be farther down the road into recovery, but someone that's dealing with, or maybe you're never going to mentor anybody dealing with addiction. Maybe it's just someone in your family, or hopefully this will help you with somebody. So here's some practical things that I would say that might help. Number one, I would say, is to ask questions. What I mean by that is, when you see someone in their addiction, or maybe they're in recovery and they're just not acting right, and you can just, you've got this thing that, maybe you call intuition, maybe you call discernment, whatever it is you call, you can see it, and, you can point it out, right? So when you're dealing with someone in addiction, or not of their addiction, just pointing something out to someone, an unsolicited advice, can get really tough. And it can put you immediately on the defensive. And when you're dealing with someone that is either in addiction or has dealt with addiction, you've got a couple of strong emotions that are going to be right out front. You're going to have denial. What are you talking about? What do you mean? Or you're going to have straight up anger. They're going to just push back out to you, and they're going to make it about you, and they're going to turn it back on you, and they know all the buttons to push to back you off of their pain and their wound. Asking questions is this beautiful, soft way to get access and permission into someone's life. Hey, you asked me to mentor you, and I love doing that. And so I think I see some things in you, and would you want me to kind of talk to you about what I see in you? Or, hey, I would love to help you on this journey towards intimacy, or this relationship with God that you said you want to get better, and this relationship with your wife, your husband, or your friends. Would you want me to kind of help point things out in your life, or to be honest with you, or whatever it is? So I had a friend that would do this to me all the time. He was notorious for it. He'd come up to me and say, hey, man, I got a couple things I think for you that I see or whatever. Do you want to hear them? And I'd be like, no. Yes. Sometimes I would literally be like, yes, I do, but not today. I'm having a rough day. I want to hear about it tomorrow. Right? Or sometimes I'll be like, let me just call you back in a week, because then I'll be prepared to hear what it is you got to say. But he was asking if I actually wanted to know, and I think he was actually pretty willing to not tell me if I didn't want to know. And so it was always this really good way for me to help to get prepared. So maybe you feel out of control, and so it helped me to be in control of something that I felt out of control of. So asking questions is a really good thing. Next thing I would say is Carefrontation. A little bit of a play on words, it's not quite a misspelling. Carefrontation. All right, has anyone ever heard about tough love around recovery? Like, you just got to have tough love. I know you've all heard that. I don't really dig that so much. And I think in that TED Talk, you can kind of hear some of the same undertones of how we're treating someone that's in their addiction. Because when we think about tough love, we think about being tough on somebody. You know, you get this kind of a drill sergeant sort of mentality of, you're going to do this and you're going to do that. And, you know, and I'm just loving you and blah, blah, blah. I think that we could maybe spin tough love completely around on its axis and look at it from a different perspective. And that is, love somebody in a way that is tough for you. To love somebody in a way that is tough for you, right? Because it's really tough to be open and vulnerable and talk and tell them how it's making you feel, and really tough to maybe do, especially if you're a parent or a loved one. You know, you're going against all the wiring in the DNA of your body to be a provider, protector, and a nurturer, to love someone in a really tough way. And so it's loving someone in a way that is tough for you. And when you choose to do that, or when they give you permission to do that, do it in a way that is a way that you would want somebody to do it to you, right? The truth is hard enough to hear. In other words, the truth hurts plenty. We don't have to add any to it. So when someone sees something about me, like that guy that would come ask for me permission, you know, if I wanted to see what he saw, the words that came out of his mouth were so painful because they were the truth. You know, it just hurt, like, oh, God, you're right. That hurts so much. So how would I want someone to say that to me? Just say it in love to me. You know, say it in a way that is not confronting, but that is carefrontation. So just think about when you are handling that with someone, to do it in a way that you would want somebody to confront it with you, okay? So carefrontation. Next thing I would say is to be their mentor, not their treatment program. Be their mentor, not their treatment program. What I mean is, your goal, your job is to walk hand in hand, side by side, and counsel and mentor someone on this journey away from the thing they were addicted to and towards these intimate, connected relationships. What you do not have to be is an expert. Okay, so this is letting you off the hook, and it's also knowing the role that you should be in and the role you do not want to be in, I promise. Okay, so this is for you and for them. For them, you don't want to be their whole treatment program, because I don't mean this against you, but trust me, you're not enough. And you don't want to give them the opportunity to use you as an excuse to not have to go deeper into what was actually driving their addiction in the first place. You know, this person may need to take a really deep dive into what was driving that addiction in the first place, and you might not be enough for that. The context of a mentor-mentee relationship is probably not the right place for that to be everything that they need as it relates to recovery. So be their mentor, not their whole treatment program, and be able to kind of help to understand that difference and have other people help you know when you're kind of crossing over that line and maybe getting onto the unhealthy side of that. All right, the next thing I would say is to have empathy, but don't fix them. Have empathy, but don't fix them. I explained some of this about our needs because if you have not been through addiction, it's really hard to empathize. They just don't make any sense to you. And trust me, you don't make any sense to them. Y'all are just thinking completely different. It's like you're not understanding each other. So it's hard to empathize. I can empathize with someone that's in addiction because I've been through it. I have that built in because of my experience. But what you can empathize with is a person that is hurting, a person that is struggling, a person that is not feeling like they're getting their needs met. You know, I had somebody that worked for us was saying that she was so addicted to work. She was so addicted to work because when she would go there, they thought she was really smart and they liked her, and she'd go home and her husband really didn't seem to care about her or think she was smart or love her. And so she has never dealt with addiction firsthand, but she can really empathize with what it feels like to get your needs met in a place because you're not getting it met somewhere else. And so you can understand that and or you can empathize with that. But I don't want you to feel like that you have to fix them. All right, that is not your job. This whole thing hinges on this beautiful gift that God gave us called choice. I mean, what a gift. I mean, how crazy is he for loving somebody so much and then giving them the choice and the ability to hurt themselves? Like, what a gift he gave us. But it is their choice, and I do not want you to feel like that you are signing up to have to fix them. You do not want to take the credit for that, and I promise you don't want the blame for that. So you can empathize with them, you can help understand, but do not take on the responsibility of trying to fix them. Next thing I'd say is to be yourself. if you've ever been around anybody in recovery or even in their addiction, there's something really cool about them that you'll notice really, really fast. They are like so open, so honest, and they're so like authentic, right? Because at some point they've decided that they're not going to accept any BS. That's an acronym for Bachelor of Science. And they just want to be real. They want things that are real. And so if you want to get access into a person's life, there is nothing that cuts through everything else like being yourself. They will pick up on that in about 2 seconds flat. And then guess what? The thing that you're there to do, to love them and to help them on this journey towards intimacy, they're going to start to open that up to you, okay? So there are so many great counselors. There's so many psychiatrists and psychologists and maybe even so many great mentors. And don't try to be any of those. The only thing that you can be the very best in the world at is being you. The only thing that you can uniquely be is just you. And so being that, just giving yourself permission to be yourself is actually maybe one of your most valuable tools to help someone that is dealing with this. So be yourself. The other thing I would say just real quickly is to understand the severity of the landscape of addiction, okay? So what I will tell you is that outside of this, I don't talk a lot about what it is that they were using because I think what you're using can change and it's all interchangeable, and what's more important is what's underneath that, what's driving the addiction. But do understand when you're dealing with somebody in addiction to understand that there are some things, if they are using heroin, okay, if that's their thing, and maybe they're in recovery and maybe they're talking about relapsing, right? There are some really dangerous things out there. Right here where we sit, there's been a 4,000% increase in heroin deaths in the last 5 years. Just scary, scary stuff. And so if you are dealing with somebody and they're talking about using pills and using heroin, those are more red flags than other things. You know, I do want you to take more precaution and caution of when they're talking about, if someone might be talking about using those things. Heroin is completely deadly in and of itself. It's now getting laced with fentanyl, which is basically 100 times stronger than morphine. And they're also getting laced with carfentanil, which is an elephant tranquilizer. Like it takes about that much to be a deadly dose, and it is just killing people left and right. And so I don't, just pause for a moment and understand that if you are dealing with someone that is dealing with those drugs specifically, it does have to be handled different by way of how you react if they're telling you that they're dealing with something. I would tell you if you're a parent and it was your kid, it's a different generation and a different day. You now have to, what we would have called back in the day, overreacting. You have to overreact, okay? You can't give them these kind of lanes. They're going to grow up, they're going to figure it out, and they're going to be okay. They're going to bump their heads. No, people are dying before they ever get a chance to figure it out, okay? So do understand those things, all right? So understand the severity of that. The next thing I would say is that mentors need their own resource. So what's not going to happen, and you've been mentoring people already most likely, when's the last time anyone said, hey, what do you need? Right? It's probably not going to happen that much. And if it has, then great for those people. That says a lot about their growth as a person. But in addiction, it's probably not going to happen. They are going to take. And so you're going to be giving and giving and giving. And so be sure that you have something filling you back up. All right? So filling you back up and what your needs are. And also, when it comes to addiction, some of it's just really confusing. And so be sure that you have a resource for yourself, some air support, that you can go to and say, hey, I'm dealing with this, and I don't really know exactly how I should handle that. Or they're talking about doing this, and that's just not anywhere in my universe of understanding. And so, getting yourself resources so you don't feel like that you're bearing this burden of being the last person in line, right? So get your own resource. Guard your heart, and boundaries is the next thing I would say. To guard your heart, I'm talking about boundaries. Anybody ever read the book Boundaries? Oh my gosh, so good. And it so relates to mentoring someone that is in addiction. And so maybe even go back and read it in the context of dealing with someone in their addiction, because you have to have clear and defined boundaries in your life, and maybe even communicate them to the person that you're mentoring. Understand, hey, my role in your life is to be your mentor. I'm not going to be your sponsor, right? And I'm not going to be your treatment program. And so, look, if you're about to die and it's 3 a.m, call me. Or text me. But just don't text me at 3 a.m. just because you're, having kind of this emotion or whatever, right? You've got to kind of put some boundaries there, because I promise if you don't put those boundaries are going to get pushed in on, they're going to get eroded, and you're not going to like what you're left with. As a matter of fact, then you might not end up being a healthy relationship where needs are met. You might be getting taken advantage of, and it might be moving towards getting a counterfeit of that. right? And so use a boundary to help define a healthy relationship, to be able to walk with someone and mentor them through this journey. So guard your heart. And then the last thing I would say is to define a win. Define a win. All right, understand that during this journey, here's what I would call a win. Maybe right about there. That's a pretty big win. Okay? What I'm saying is that when you're dealing with someone with addiction, if you don't understand what a win is, you're probably going to feel like you failed, because you might not get this beautiful process of really walking them all the way down a journey and farther into intimacy. So a win is really any step, any exposure towards helping them understand and walking with them towards getting their needs met in a healthy way. I'll give you an example of that. When I first started my recovery journey 13 years ago, I went and met with this guy. I was a 24-year-old kid. Any of you moms in the room would have just wanted to spank me. I was just a little punk. Oh, my gosh. Just a little strung-out punk. And so I'm sitting there like smoking a cigarette, and this guy's talking to me something about recovery. I don't really remember. And to this day, I don't know that man's name, and I guarantee he doesn't know mine. And surely he wouldn't be expecting me to be standing here talking to you today. So in other words, when he left that meeting, he probably did not feel like he won anything. But to this day, that moment, all I really saw was that for whatever he was saying, that there was hope. That he had an idea about who I was, what I was struggling with, and he had some concept about what was on the other side of it. And so all I really heard was there's hope. And so literally that man never knew that he won, right? And so define that win in your life so that if this relationship doesn't go maybe like you would love it to and like you would expect it to, that you still understand that you intersected someone in a really beautiful time in their life. And so lastly, let me kind of rehearse for you what the mission of your church is. The mission at North Point is to lead someone into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. Anybody ever heard that yet? Like 8,000 times. To lead someone into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. So because you believe in that mission lives inside of your heart, that you care so much that you would choose to mentor, that you care about leading someone towards a growing or an escalating relationship with Jesus Christ, I would challenge you and say, I think you already have everything that you need. You understand how to lead someone towards a growing relationship with Jesus Christ, and in doing so, you pretty much know how to walk someone out of addiction. Okay? And I would also say that just to think about addiction as an opportunity. My God, what a beautiful opportunity. Someone is probably at their bottom, or they've been to the bottom and they have an understanding of that, and maybe they're in recovery. But addiction is this amazing opportunity that you get to intersect someone at some point in this journey, and you get to help them and lead them into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ, an intimate, real, authentic relationship with Jesus Christ. And so we look at addiction like it's this massive epidemic and this huge problem, and it is, and we have to do something about it, and we are. But it's also this incredible opportunity, because when I get that low and I get that broken and that beat up, I am so ready to hear, this did not work, I know it didn't work, and thank God I didn't die. So now I'm really ready to hear what does work and what is real and how do I get those needs met. So understand the opportunity that you're intersecting someone in their life with. So in just a moment, we're going to allow you guys some time to talk around the table, and then we're going to come back to some questions. But before that, I just want to pray for you. So let's do that, okay? God, thank you so much for these people and for being here with us. God, thank you so much. This is a strange thing to say, but thank you for addiction. And whatever it is that causes someone to realize that it's not working without you, that they're not getting their true needs met, that they are missing something, that there is a void. And God, I ask that you would help these people and all of us that are here tonight to understand where someone might be in that journey, to equip us, to help us to believe in ourselves, and to empower us to give these people what they need. And for these mentors that are here tonight, God, I just thank you so much for what you have done in their hearts and for where they personally are in their own journey towards intimacy and their growing relationship with you, and that their presence here tonight is the actual evidence of that. So I just thank you so much for what they've chosen to do, and I pray that you would just bless their lives, that you would be one of those resources to them, to fill them back up for the things that they are giving away, that you would bless their lives in ways that they never understood possible. We love you. We call you our daddy. It's your name. Amen.